So, Chad, let's start at the top. They are the national champions once again, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And wow, quarterback gone, running back gone, those two studs back at wide receiver. The defense has been ravaged by some losses to the NFL, but of course the talent's all over the place.
Yeah, I don't think it's there's going to be any issue there. I don't know. It's going to be a third year in a row for Kiffin to have a new starting quarterback for him. So he's proven he could do it the 2 years prior. Let's see what he does this year. It looks like it's going to be redshirt sophomore Blake Barnett, who's most likely going to be looked at to be the starter. The passing offense, it did okay last year. It was ranked number 5 in the SEC, which is better than the lower half at 227 yards per game, 3,400 yards plus total in passing last year. So I think it's going to be a matter of trying to reload and identify some early candidates and leaders in certain positions early on the offense, specifically at quarterback and running back. Running back after the loss of Henry and Drake, so you're looking for not just one but two guys to step up. Damian Harris, Bo Scarborough are going to be the leaders in the doghouse coming out. And you're going to look at freshmen Josh Jacobs and B.J. Emmons will be in as well. So those are Emmons, whichever way you want to say it, will be looked at maybe to contribute early on as well. The run game, one of the best, man. Third in the SEC behind LSU and Tennessee at 2,900 yards, almost might as well call it 3,000, 4.6 yards per carry, and they about 199 yards per game. 33 touchdowns this last season on the ground, second in the SEC in touchdowns, running wise. Some areas that you really want to keep an eye on with this Alabama team in transition is specifically with the defensive coaching staff that's been revamped. You're going to have to take a look at that and kind of how that's going to affect. Mel Tucker leaves, goes defense coordinator Kirby Smart, Georgia. So you also got 4 down linemen that you're losing. Those two guys, 4 guys. You saw a lot of rotation. 2 of those guys will probably be first-round picks in the NFL draft coming up. Then you turn around, you lose a starting safety and you linebacker as well, who's possibly going to be another first-round draft pick. So the D-line to me is really going to be interesting. And of course the secondary, like I said, with Mel Tucker leaving, Coach Ansley's coming in from Kentucky. May not seem like a big hire, but this guy was a grad assistant there at Alabama between 2010 and 2011. And he helped Kentucky's defense reach a school record six defensive touchdowns this last season. So you also want to look at him as a guy that can fill in pretty quick. Again, 23 turnovers in 2015. That was second in the SEC. You wouldn't have thought that about a school like Kentucky, but he was able to do it. So interested to see those storylines and how they progress through this spring going into the fall.
I think that Alabama front 7, and specifically the front 4, was maybe the most devastating unit we've seen in recent years in college football. And you mentioned the loss of Jaron Reed, A'Shawn Robinson, the 2 big stalwarts at tackle, gone. On the offensive side, yeah, third straight year. So Blake Sims, Jacob Coker going at it a couple years ago. Sims inexplicably, unexpectedly wins the job. Coker comes back, pulls in a fine season, very pedestrian-type season until late, and really showed that he could throw the football and open it up against 2 really good teams to win the college football playoff. Interesting to see. We think of Alabama running game because of the offensive line. It doesn't matter who the back is, but of course they've had the transition from Ingram to Richardson to Yeldon to Henry. So is Bo Scarborough or Damian Harris, either one of those guys, up to the challenge of carrying the mail when it really counts down the stretch in the SEC? Blake Barnett, probably the most talented with the highest ceiling of the quarterback competitors, David. So your thoughts about Bama?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about Bo Scarborough coming in. It was, he's kind of been the running back, coming in as a freshman that hasn't jumped on the scene like past Alabama running backs did. But that's just because, Derrick Henry was so dominant and they just let him take over games. I'm going to harp on what Chad said. I'm ready to see what's going to change on the defensive side of the ball. We know that's Nick Saban's defense, but Kirby Smart was there for so long. What happens now when you lose that much talent, you're switching defensive coordinators for the first time since I think 2008. That's how long Kirby Smart had been there. So, what happens when and we've mentioned the names, Cyrus Jones, Reggie Ragland, Jaron Reed, A'Shawn Robinson. I mean, it could have been much worse too, but Jonathan Allen, Tim Williams, Reuben Foster, they put off the draft. They came back. So he's got plenty to they brought in Jeremy Pruitt, and we've seen what he's done with FSU and Georgia. lately, but it's going to be there's a lot of changeover, and the secondary was a big problem until they brought Mel Tucker in the last 2 years. Alabama had a propensity to give the big play up a lot, and he really helped shore that up. And Kirby Smart thought enough of him to take him with him to be his defensive coordinator at Georgia. So it's weird to say that Alabama could have a problem on defense. I won't necessarily call it a problem, but it will. It's a different scenario than what we've seen these defense have to deal with going into this spring.
And if they can find the right trigger man, the offense could be prolific in addition to the running game with Darius Stewart, Calvin Ridley, and look at O.J. Howard. The numbers weren't there in the regular season, and then look what he did in the college football playoff against Michigan State and specifically against Clemson. Wow, this guy is a talent and a nightmare of a mismatch for secondaries. Mike, your thoughts about the Crimson Tide going to practice last week?
Yeah, Mark, I think you bring up a great point with O.J. Howard. Just like David mentioned, the three key guys on defense who chose to come back instead of leaving the draft early, O.J. Howard did as well. And I think when you see a first-year starting quarterback, probably Barnett, possibly Bateman, O.J. Howard is really going to help them out in addition to the receivers coming back. He was woefully underutilized in the regular season last year, had a breakout performance in the college football playoffs. But in the SEC, where you have these tremendous defensive lines and these very fast secondary, that tight end is a key position. We saw that in Arkansas last year. We've seen it in the East a couple of times. So I think O.J. Howard is going to be the key to a successful transition to another first-year starting quarterback. I think Bo Scarborough is going to be the guy at running back. Alabama has historically had multiple running backs, just like Chad said, but they've also used their workhorse a lot. Scarborough's in that mold, short, very muscular, just a bruising running back. I agree with David. I think the secondary is going to be better, and I think it's going to be good for Alabama because if you look at probably the team coming back, one of the two teams with the biggest threat, Ole Miss, their strength is going to be Chad Kelly and his passing. So I think that secondary getting right at the right time, and I think it was a great hire, the coach to replace Tucker in the secondary. I think that really helps them against probably their toughest opponent, Ole Miss. Of course, their other toughest opponent I think is going to be LSU with Fournette, and that depleted defensive line is going to be tested in that game. So I agree with you guys. I'm really interested to see how well they replenish the defensive line, but I think their secondary is going to be as good or better than last year. That's going to help them out against Ole Miss.